Coeddil here, and today I will be ranking every legendary hero in the game on just how powerful they are in the single player campaign map. Things I will take into consideration when making this ranking will be just how useful these heroes are on the battlefield, their impact on the campaign, how much more useful they are in comparison to regular heroes, and how strong they can make your armies in general. I will be placing them in 4 different categories: game-changing, decently strong, mediocre, and is this really a legendary hero? Now the first should be self-explanatory. Game-changing are heroes that are very strong, to a point where they can actually influence the outcome of battles. Decently strong are legendary heroes which can influence the outcome of battles, but nowhere near as much as the game-changing heroes. Mediocre is a category for heroes that can barely say they are any better than regular heroes, and you often forget they even exist. And finally, the is this even a legendary hero category, where we are questioning the fact if these heroes truly are special enough to be called legendary. In my view, the best legendary heroes will be the ones that are somewhere in between the 2 top rankings. I don't think legendary heroes should be as strong as legendary lords, but if they are barely any different from regular heroes, then there really isn't much of a reason to call them legendary, now is there? First, I will go over all of the legendary heroes added before Warhammer 3 released, and then we will move on to heroes added during Warhammer 3. So, first off, we have Coeddil. Coeddil is a 3-man legendary hero that is also a spellcaster, casting a strange mixture of wild and dark magic, which mostly provides buffs and debuffs. He has a melee line, which can make him a decently strong melee combatant, and some damaging abilities. He does boost Treemen, Treekin, and Dryads, but by a very small amount. I would say that he belongs somewhere in the mediocre ranking, as he isn't going to influence the outcome of battles too much. Next we have Ariel, again for the Wood Elves. She is an amazing spellcaster with a mixed lore of dark, life, and high magic that has an amazing spell selection. She also boosts spellcasting for her entire army by quite a bit. She provides you with decent global and local bonuses. She provides buffs for Sisters of the Thorn unit, as well as providing the accompanying Lord with some extra ward save. She has some decent damaging abilities, as well as healing abilities, and her item effects are also decently strong. So when you compare Ariel to Coeddil, it is literally night to day. And that is why Ariel is a game-changing legendary hero, and Coeddil is just mediocre. Now let's move on to the vampire counts, where we have Krell. Now Krell is really just a big question as to what he is. He is a summonable hero for Heinrich Kemmler that doesn't degrade over time. He should also come with 2 abilities, but half the time you summon him, he is missing them. He can't level up, so he can't get any more powerful than you start off with. So I'm just gonna put him in the is this a legendary hero ranking, because honestly I don't even know what he is. Next up, we have Robert Bartholomew for the Vampire Coast, who is a ethereal paladin, whose unique skills are just about boosting his melee stats, which can make him a decent melee combatant. But really, he isn't much stronger than a regular paladin, and by himself he can't influence the outcome of any battles, which means he goes into the is this actually a legendary hero category. For the Skaven, we have Ghoritch, who is not at all as terrible as I had initially thought. He is a very powerful melee combatant with a decent AoE ability, but what he does extremely well is boost Strott's faction by providing you with extra growth juice, and he does buff his army by a decent amount, especially monstrous units in his armies, which all makes him a decently strong legendary hero. Next, for the Lizardmen, we have Lord Kroak. And I don't think anybody is shocked here, but he is a game-changing legendary hero. He has some amazing spellcasting, amazing abilities, and he can boost the spellcasting of his entire army. He alone can pretty much solo entire armies. Now on to Bretonnia, where we have even more paladins. First off is Henri le Massif, who is a paladin that has access to a hippogriff mount, which does make him a fairly strong melee combatant. He also boosts knight units somewhat, but nothing major, so I would put him somewhere at the bottom of the mediocre ranking. The Green Knight, on the other hand, is another ethereal paladin, but this one though can't level up, so he can't get any stronger than he starts out. He is also granted as a reward for reaching a certain amount of chivalry, and all of this just makes him inferior to even a basic paladin. So really, can he even be called a legendary hero? Now on to all of the heroes that are part of a unique mechanic. First up, let's go for the ancestral heroes for Belegar, and really these can hardly be even called legendary. If you were to replace them with a regular hero, there would be no difference in your starting campaigns. They provide you with no unique bonuses for your armies and have the exact same skill tree as regular heroes. Being ethereal can help, but if you ever encounter magic attacks, especially in the early game, you better run. So really, all of these guys fall into the category of, is this actually a legendary hero? On to the second batch of heroes that are part of a faction mechanic, Marcus Wulfhart's Hunter Expedition. It consists of a dwarf engineer that has a mildly useful trait, a Waywatcher hero that has nothing unique, an inquisitor that has almost nothing unique except a buff for nearby units, a paladin that can't even ride a horse, but surprisingly is the only one out of this lot that can actually provide you with some useful bonuses. All of these fall into the category of, is this a legendary hero, as none of them will impact anything really. And if you ever get them wounded, you can say goodbye to their unique quest mechanics, as it will bug out and not progress any further. Now that we've done all the Warhammer 2 heroes, let's go on to Warhammer 3. And first up, Gotrek. Now Gotrek is a fairly bad melee combatant, as all slayers are, but he can be useful for killing high value lords and heroes. He also provides some decent situational buffs for his armies, so I would say he is somewhat of a mediocre hero, although somewhere at the top of the ranking, just because most of the buffs he provides for your armies are situational. And let's not forget, we can't talk about Gotrek without talking about Felix. Felix, I feel, is a rather lackluster legendary hero. He doesn't provide any bonuses besides relations with men and dwarves, and the rest of his unique skill line is just making him into a better fighter, as well as healing 1 to 2 nearby lords or heroes, so long as he is in melee. Really, that is the only unique thing Felix gets, and most of the time you will have access to healing, so it isn't really that useful overall. He also isn't an amazing melee combatant, as he dies way too quickly, so I really do question if you can call him a legendary hero. To round up the gang, we have Ulrika, who is a vampire missile melee hybrid that can also cast spells. Talk about overkill. And yet, she is still not at all amazing. She is decent in everything, and being a spellcaster is always good, but she does very little to boost her armies. Mostly some spell and fire resistance, which is fine, but nothing overly impactful. Overall, I would say she belongs somewhere in the middle of mediocrity. Up next we have Garagrim Ironfist, Ungrim's son, who is a Slayer hero, and like all Slayer heroes, is a terrible unit to have in melee. But luckily for him, he provides some decent bonuses to his armies, such as speed, melee attack, upkeep reduction, and so on. But unfortunately only for Slayers. Still though, he can make the army he is embedded in fairly strong. I would say he can be a decently strong hero, so long as you embed him in an army filled with mostly Slayers, but somewhere at the very bottom of decently strong. Next we have Theodore Bruckner, who I'm just gonna outright say shouldn't even be called a legendary hero. All he is a Empire captain with extra melee stats, but less campaign usefulness. Really, the only thing he is useful for is watching his animations, and maybe killing enemy heroes. But you already have so many tools when it comes to killing heroes and lords that Theodore just seems completely unnecessary to have. Another hero who I question if it should even be called a legendary hero is the Golden Knight, but is actually decent enough to be put at the bottom of mediocrity. She really doesn't benefit your armies too much, as she mostly boosts late game units at rank 7. She does boost the accompanying lord a little bit as well, and is a decent melee combatant, which is no better than any other melee hero you have. So really, what is the point of having her? I would have put her in the is this a legendary hero ranking, but she can be somewhat useful in Catherine's army, so I will just leave her in mediocrity. Next we have Saytang the Watcher, a Cathayan legendary hero who is something in between a Bone Giant and a Terracotta Sentinel. A range unit with decent melee stats, but what makes him extremely useful are all of the bonuses he provides to your armies. He buffs almost every single Cathayan unit there is, and not by small margins either. Ammunition, missile damage, range, and so on. So a good combatant, with fairly strong buffs for his armies, makes him a rather decently strong legendary hero, somewhere at the very top even. Now onto a special case with Isabella and Vlad von Karstein that can be legendary heroes as well as legendary lords in Warhammer 3. But you can only ever have one of them in your campaign, depending on if you play as Vlad or Isabella. And I don't think it's going to be too much of a surprise to realize that they are both game-breaking legendary heroes. But I mean, what else would you expect when you put a legendary lord in the role of a hero? Next we have Gorduz Backstabber, and he is a very powerful legendary hero, probably what all legendary heroes should look like. He isn't an amazing melee combatant, and gets beat up by almost everything in the game, but he is extremely powerful when it comes to providing your armies with various bonuses. All of them for hobgoblins though. He provides hobgoblins with so many stats that they go from mere cannon fodder to a actual doom stack level. So I don't think it is too much of a surprise that he is a game-changing legendary hero. Next up we have Harald Hammerstorm, a extremely powerful melee combatant with some decent buffs for the entire army. Now he isn't someone who can single-handedly change the course of a battle, but depending on what you bring him against, he should provide your armies with a decent advantage. So long as you don't bring him up against something that has extreme fire resistance, for example, Chaos Dwarfs. With that being said, I do believe he belongs somewhere a bit lower than Ulrika when it comes to the mediocre ranking. Next we have Karanak, who is a good boy, is decently strong in melee with some interesting abilities. He is very good when it comes to killing enemy lords and heroes, but unfortunately every Chaos faction is already good at that. He also provides some interesting buffs for Warhounds and Fleshhounds, but they are so insignificant that they don't really seem all that useful. It pains me to say it, but I think Karanak belongs somewhere at the bottom half of mediocrity. Up next is Aekold Helbrass, who I used to think was fairly weak, but after taking a second look at him, he is quite powerful indeed. He is a strong melee combatant with extremely powerful healing abilities, and quite powerful buffs for your entire army. These buffs alone are enough to make him decently strong, but combined with healing, I think makes him a game-changing legendary hero. Next, we have the goofiest hero of them all, the Blue Scribes, who are extremely hit or miss when it comes to being on the battlefield, mostly because of the random nature of their spellcasting. Luckily for them, they also provide some massive buffs for horror units in your armies, and the bonuses for horrors alone make them a decently strong hero, but with their spellcasting, so long as Tzeentch favors you, they probably can become a game-changing hero. And now on to the third batch of unique heroes from campaign mechanics, Tamurkhan's Chieftains, who I must say are much better than the unique heroes for Marcus or Belegar. They also have some unique abilities called Chieftain abilities, which I will also take into consideration when ranking them, but I will also give you my opinion on where they would be ranked if they didn't have these abilities. First off, we have Kazak the Befouled, who is a decent melee combatant and provides your armies with very powerful bonuses for cavalry units. Overall a strong hero, but somewhere on the bottom half side. Next, Kurgan the Crazed, who is a very powerful combatant, but nothing more really, as he is barely any useful than a exalted hero. Overall, he can be very powerful on the battlefield, especially because he rides a dragon, and if you're playing Tamurkhan, he does have a very powerful chieftain ability, so I will say he belongs somewhere in the mediocre ranking. If you are counting the chieftain ability, then at the top half of the mediocre ranking, and if you aren't, well then at the bottom half. Next is Ketzak, a Fimmer Balefiend that is just a spellcaster and nothing more. He does provide some bonuses, but like Marcus's heroes, nothing that will actually help you win battles. so I am questioning whether or not he should even be called a legendary hero. Next we have Mournhowl, who is a Skinwolf Werekin hero who does boost your army by a decent amount, as well as debuffs enemy armies, but what makes him really strong are his chieftain abilities, allowing him and all of your armies to have the stalking stance. So if you're playing as Tamurkhan, he is a decently strong hero, but if you get him when not playing as Tamurkhan, he is somewhere in the mediocre ranking. Next is a Bray Shaman of Wilds, who is just a spellcaster that doesn't boost your army to any extent, and has a rather lackluster chieftain ability. So really, I wouldn't even call him a legendary hero. Finally, we have Azar Doombolt, who is a Infernal Castellan that would have actually been a decently strong hero if he were available for the Chaos Dwarfs. But because he is being wasted on Nurgle, I would have to say he is not even worth being called a legendary hero. Lastly, we have two unique heroes for Norsca that you get by dedicating to the Dark Gods. Kilgore Slaymaim, who you get when dedicating to the Hound, that is a exalted hero of Khorne that provides your army with some decent bonuses, which I would have to say make him a decently strong hero. And Kihar the Tormentor, who you get by dedicating to the Serpent, who also provides your army with some amazing bonuses, but is also a spellcaster who is mounted on a dragon, which makes him infinitely better than Kilgore, and is probably somewhere along the lines of a game-changing legendary hero. Now that should do it for all of the legendary heroes. I know there are still some unique heroes in the game, but most of them provide some bound spells or item abilities, nothing that's actually noteworthy, so I won't be mentioning them here. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe for future content. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.
Khorne fights as one.